She brought food to a beggar for weeks. Then he said, "I'm a black billionaire." Esther woke before dawn, the sky still a muted grey, the streets of her neighborhood slowly stirring to life. The faint hum of early morning traffic mingled with the distant sounds of vendors setting up their stalls, children's laughter echoing faintly through the air. It was a typical day in the heart of the city, but for Esther, each day was a battle between hope and hardship. At 24, she carried the weight of 1,000 struggles, but her smile never wavered. Her small food stall, nestled under the sprawling branches of a cracked oak tree, was made from weathered planks and rusted iron sheets, a humble beacon for the locals who passed by on their way to work or school. Despite her worn slippers and patched dress, Esther greeted every customer with warmth. "Good morning, sir." "Welcome." Her voice gentle yet firm, a contrast to the grime and chaos that surrounded her. She woke early every day, cooking rice, beans, and yam porridge over a small flickering fire. Her hands moved with practiced speed, but her heart held a quiet sadness. She had no family left, both parents lost when she was barely a child, and she lived alone in a cramped, dimly lit room with cracked walls and no running water. But she dreamed, not of wealth or luxury, but of a life where kindness mattered more than survival. One afternoon, as Esther wiped the dust off her rickety wooden table, her friend Mamie walked by, carrying a basket of fresh vegetables. Mamie was a robust woman in her 50s, known for her blunt honesty and no-nonsense attitude. "Esther, why are you always smiling?" "You're struggling just like the rest of us," Mamie said, shaking her head in disbelief. Esther smiled softly, her eyes never leaving the horizon. "Because crying won't put food on my table," she replied. Mamie chuckled, but those words lingered in Esther's mind long after she left. Life was tough, but Esther believed in kindness. Every day, regardless of her own hunger, she offered what little food she had to those who couldn't pay. She didn't have much, but she shared it willingly, hoping that one day her heart's generosity would be repaid. Her routine was interrupted one sweltering afternoon by the slow, deliberate creak of wheels on uneven pavement. Esther looked up and saw him, the man everyone called Papa J. He was a beggar, old and crippled, his legs wrapped in tattered bandages, seated in a worn-out wheelchair that looked barely able to hold his frail frame. His clothes hung in tatters, dust clinging to his face and hands. Passers-by whispered cruel words, some crossing the street to avoid him, others laughing or holding their noses. But Esther never looked away. "Papa J, you're here again," she said softly, kneeling beside him. "Didn't you eat yesterday?" He looked down, his voice barely a whisper. "Too weak to come," he admitted. 2 days without food. Esther's heart clenched. Her table held only one plate of beans and yam, the very meal she had hoped to eat herself that night. She hesitated, then carefully picked up the plate and placed it before him. "Eat," she urged gently. He looked at the food, then back at her. "You're giving me your last meal?" She nodded, smiling despite the fatigue in her bones. "I'll cook more when I get home." His hands trembled as he took the spoon. His eyes welled with tears, but he swallowed his emotions and ate slowly, savoring each bite. The world around them seemed to blur, the curious stares, the whispers, the judgment, all fading into the background. "Why do you always feed that beggar, Esther?" a woman asked later as she passed. Esther's smile never faltered. "If I were in his place, wouldn't I want someone to help me too?" Papa J never begged aloud. He never stretched his hands out, never demanded. He simply sat quietly, head bowed, hands resting on his knees. His wheelchair creaked as he moved, the wheels wobbly, threatening to break. Yet Esther's kindness remained constant, a small flame in his dark world. Days turned into weeks. Esther continued to bring him food, sometimes rice, sometimes beans and yam, always fresh and warm. One afternoon, after serving 2 schoolboys a plate of jollof rice, she looked up and saw Papa J as usual, sitting quietly by the roadside, wrapped in his old bandages. Despite the grime, the holes in his shirt, he radiated a calm dignity. Esther scooped a generous portion of jollof rice, adding 2 small pieces of meat, and carried it to him. "Your food is ready, Papa J," she said softly. His eyes met hers, tired but gentle. "You remember me?" he whispered. Esther knelt beside him and placed the plate on a small stool. "Even if the whole world forgets you, I won't." Before she could sit back down, a sleek black car pulled up abruptly in front of her stall. The door swung open and a tall man stepped out, wearing a crisp white shirt and polished shoes. His gaze fixed on Papa J, his eyes sharp and unblinking. Esther greeted him politely, but he barely acknowledged her. He walked toward Papa J, who had paused mid-bite, his expression unreadable. The man took a step closer, tilting his head as if to place a memory. Then he turned to Esther. "1 plate of jollof rice with meat, please," he requested. Without hesitation, Esther served him, handing over the steaming plate. As the man ate, he glanced once more at Papa J, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. Without another word, he returned to his car and drove away. The next morning, Esther woke early as always. She cleaned her stall and scanned the street for Papa J, but he was nowhere to be found. Hours passed. No wheelchair, no Papa J. Her heart raced as she asked around. "Have you seen Papa J today?" "No," said Mamie, shrugging. "Maybe he's tired of sitting there. Or maybe he's gone." 2 more days passed without a sign of him. Esther's smile faded. The joy that had brightened her stall dimmed. She served customers, but her heart ached with worry. At night, she sat alone in her tiny room, clutching the last plate she'd served Papa J. "He never misses a day," she murmured. "Not rain, not sickness." Why now? Fear gnawed at her. Something was wrong, terribly wrong, and deep inside, she knew her life was about to change forever. The morning air was thick with humidity as Esther stepped out of her small room, her heart heavy with worry. Papa J's absence gnawed at her like an ache she couldn't shake. She moved mechanically, preparing the little food she could afford, but her smile was a fragile thing, cracking with each passing moment, without news of the man who had come to mean so much more than a beggar to her. She swept the wooden floor in front of her stall, eyes darting nervously toward the busy street. The usual hum of life around her, the shouts of market vendors, the laughter of children, the constant chatter of neighbors, felt distant, almost unreal. Her thoughts kept drifting back to Papa J's weathered face, the tired eyes that still held a quiet dignity. Where could he be? Was he hurt? Had someone taken him away? Her first stop was the vegetable stall owned by Mamie, her longtime friend and sometimes harsh critic. "Mamie, have you seen Papa J?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. Mamie's eyes softened with sympathy, but she shook her head. "No, Esther. Haven't seen him in 2 days. Folks say he might have been moved by the city's services." "Or maybe he's too sick to come." Esther swallowed hard, her throat tight. "But he never misses a day, not even when it rains. Sometimes people just disappear," Mamie replied, the usual bluntness giving way to a rare tenderness. "You just have to keep hoping." Esther nodded, though hope felt thin like a thread stretched too far. She made her way to the bus stop where Papa J often sat, scanning faces for a familiar glimpse. No wheelchair. No sign of him anywhere. The days dragged on, and Esther's concern turned to despair. At the market, whispers started, questions about her devotion to a man who seemed to have vanished. "Why waste your time?" some would ask. "He's just a beggar." But Esther, though tired and frightened, held on to her belief in kindness. "Because he was a human being," she said quietly to anyone who'd listen. And sometimes that's enough. One evening, as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in bruised purples and reds, Esther sat on the edge of the street, staring at the spot where Papa J usually parked his wheelchair. Tears welled in her eyes, and for the first time in weeks, the weight of loneliness pressed down hard. Suddenly, a sleek black car rolled up beside her stall. Her heart skipped a beat. From the driver's seat, a tall man stepped out, wearing a tailored black suit and polished shoes. His eyes were intense, scanning the area before settling on Esther. "Are you Esther?" he asked, his voice calm but commanding. She nodded, clutching the cloth apron around her waist tighter. "Yes." "Who's asking?" He handed her a small sealed envelope. "Read this, and don't show it to anyone." Before she could respond, he turned and got back into the car, which sped away like a phantom. Hands trembling, Esther broke the seal. Inside was a simple note. "Come to the Grand Orion Hotel at 4 p.m. sharp. Do not tell anyone." From a friend. Her pulse raced. "A friend?" she whispered, looking up at the endless grey sky. She locked her stall early that day, the envelope burning in her pocket. Every step to the hotel felt surreal, as if she were walking toward a destiny she wasn't ready to face. The Grand Orion was a world apart from the dusty streets of her neighborhood. Towering glass walls shimmered in the afternoon light, and marble floors gleamed beneath crystal chandeliers. Esther's breath caught in her throat. She felt out of place, a small flame flickering in a palace of ice. A man in a sharp black suit greeted her at the entrance. "Esther, please follow me," he said, his tone both polite and urgent. He led her through a labyrinth of polished halls until they stopped before a grand oak door. "Someone is waiting inside," he said simply. With a deep breath, Esther pushed open the door and froze. Seated in a sleek wheelchair, dressed in a crisp white shirt with gold buttons and a wristwatch that gleamed like a star, was Papa J. But this was not the man she had known on the streets. His face was fresh, his eyes bright with power and kindness. "Esther," he said softly, a smile touching his lips. "It's me. But I am not who you think I am." Tears welled in her eyes as she took in the man before her, the billionaire who had hidden behind a veil of poverty, testing the hearts of those around him. "I'm Chief Marcus Harper," he revealed. "I chose to live as a beggar to find the true kindness in this world." "And Esther, you have shown me a heart that shines brighter than any fortune." Esther's voice trembled. "I never helped you for money or status. I helped because it was right." Marcus smiled warmly. "That is why you are here. Because of people like you, the world can be a better place." She sat down beside him, overwhelmed by the journey that had brought them together, a journey of hardship, hope, and a love forged in the fire of true kindness. The days that followed Esther's meeting with Chief Marcus Harper felt surreal, like stepping through the looking glass into a world she had only ever dreamed of. Despite the whirlwind of emotions swirling inside her, Esther tried to hold on to the steady pulse of her humble beginnings, the dusty streets of her neighborhood where she had built her life from nothing but hope and grit. Marcus, for his part, was determined to ease her into this new chapter with care and respect. He didn't want to overwhelm her with wealth or power all at once. Instead, he invited her to visit his office in the city, a modest, warmly lit space filled with books, photographs of his philanthropic projects, and a small window looking out onto the bustling skyline. Here, Marcus began to reveal his vision. "Esther!" he said one afternoon, leaning forward with genuine earnestness. I've been watching you for weeks, not just because of your kindness, but because of your strength. Your heart is pure, and your spirit unbreakable. That's why I want to help you change not just your life, but the lives of others like you. Esther blinked, feeling a mixture of awe and disbelief. But why me? Why choose someone like me from the streets? Marcus smiled softly. Because true kindness is rare. You helped me without knowing who I was. You gave from your heart when most would have turned away. That's a quality worth nurturing. As Marcus laid out plans to help Esther expand her food business, to give her not just financial support but mentorship, the gravity of the moment sank in. It wasn't just about money, it was about trust, opportunity, and belief. Meanwhile, back in her neighborhood, Esther's absence was felt deeply. Mama Titi, her sharp-tongued yet fiercely loyal friend, had taken up the mantle of caring for the shop. But it was clear she could never replace Esther's gentle smile or warm presence. Word of Esther's new friend and mysterious disappearance began to spread, sparking gossip, envy, and skepticism. One afternoon, as Esther sat in Marcus's office reviewing plans for a community kitchen they would open together, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Mama Titi. Esther, be careful. Not everyone will be happy about this. The warning lingered in Esther's mind as she prepared to face the challenges that success often brings, especially when it is born out of kindness and unexpected fortune. Just as things seemed to be aligning, a sharp twist in the tale emerged. Marcus's identity was still a secret to the public, but his sudden involvement in Esther's life caught the attention of a local politician, Richard Hale, known for his disdain of charitable projects that threatened his influence. Richard decided to investigate Esther and the mysterious benefactor. One rainy evening, he confronted Esther's assistant with veiled threats and thinly veiled accusations, insinuating that Esther's rise was nothing but a scam to grab public sympathy and financial gain. You're playing a dangerous game, Richard warned. Don't forget who controls this city's power. Word of the confrontation leaked quickly. Esther felt the weight of scrutiny bearing down on her. The community she once served now looked to her with suspicion, questioning her motives. Even some of her closest friends began to distance themselves, afraid of getting caught in the political crossfire. But Esther refused to back down. She gathered her courage and met with Marcus late one night in his office. They're trying to tear us apart, she said, her voice steady but weary. They want to discredit me, to make me feel small again. Marcus placed a reassuring hand on hers. We expected resistance, but remember why we started this. You're not just fighting for yourself, you're fighting for every single person who's ever been overlooked or underestimated. We'll face this head on. Together, they crafted a plan to expose the corruption and protect their vision. They began gathering evidence of Richard Hale's attempts to manipulate city funds and sabotage charitable efforts. Their alliance grew stronger, rooted not just in business, but in a shared mission to uplift the marginalized. In the midst of this struggle, Esther's heart remained tethered to the man who had changed everything for her. Marcus's quiet strength and unwavering faith gave her the courage to stand tall amid the storm. One evening, as they sat overlooking the city from Marcus's office balcony, Esther spoke softly. I never imagined my life could be like this. From a small stall on the street to fighting City Hall. Marcus smiled, pulling her close. It's more than a story about success. It's about truth, kindness, and justice. And you, Esther, you are its heart. As the night wrapped around them, Esther felt a deep sense of purpose. No matter what battles lay ahead, she would fight not just for herself, but for the countless others waiting for their own chance to be seen, heard, and loved. The tension in the city was palpable as Esther and Marcus prepared for the public unveiling of their community kitchen project. Word had spread about the collaboration between the humble street vendor and the mysterious benefactor, sparking curiosity and, unsurprisingly, opposition. The night before the launch, Esther lay awake, staring at the cracked ceiling of her small apartment, a place she once thought was all she'd ever have. "Esther, you ready for tomorrow?" Marcus's voice came softly through the phone. She sighed, her heart pounding. "Honestly, Marcus, I'm scared. The pressure, the politics, it's overwhelming." "What if they tear everything down? What if I'm not strong enough?" "Listen to me," Marcus said firmly. "You are stronger than you know. Remember when you helped Papa J day after day without asking for anything in return? That kindness is your armor. No one can take that away." Her mind drifted back to those early days, how Papa J's silent presence taught her more about dignity than any speech could. "I want to believe that, Marcus, but sometimes it feels like the whole city is against me." "Then we'll face it together. You're not alone." The next morning, the community kitchen stood gleaming with new hope, a beacon amidst the weathered streets. Local media swarmed, eager to tell the story of Esther's rise and the mysterious billionaire backing her. The event was buzzing with excitement until Richard Hale showed up uninvited, flanked by his political entourage. "Esther," he said, his voice dripping with condescension, "what exactly do you think you're doing here?" "Using public sympathy to mask your ambitions?" Esther felt a cold stab in her chest. "I'm here to help people, Mr. Hale. To provide food and hope to those who need it most." "Is that so? Or is this just a grand facade for something else?" His eyes narrowed as whispers spread through the crowd. Before Esther could respond, Marcus stepped forward, calm but resolute. "Mr. Hale, your accusations are baseless. This project is about community and compassion, something your administration has consistently failed to provide." The crowd murmured in approval, but Richard's sneer deepened. "Watch your words, Marcus. I know who you are, and I know your past." "Then you know I stand for what's right," Marcus shot back. "And I won't let your corruption poison this city any longer." The confrontation escalated quickly, drawing the attention of local law enforcement and the press. Esther stood beside Marcus, her fear overshadowed by a newfound courage. She raised her voice, addressing the crowd. "I don't care about politics or power. I care about people, my neighbors, friends, and even strangers. This kitchen is for them, for those who have been forgotten." Her words resonated, sparking a wave of support. But behind the scenes, the political battle was far from over. Richard Hale unleashed a smear campaign, twisting stories and painting Esther as a puppet of wealth, questioning Marcus's intentions. Esther received threatening messages and watched as some of her old friends turned their backs, succumbing to fear and doubt. The weight of betrayal stung sharply. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day, Marcus found Esther alone on the kitchen rooftop, looking out over the city lights. "They're trying to break you," he said gently. She looked at him, eyes heavy but determined. "I won't let them. Not when this means so much to so many." He reached out, taking her hand. "We'll expose the truth, your kindness, the corruption, everything. People deserve to know." Their plan was daring. A live broadcast unveiling Richard Hale's misuse of public funds, complete with undeniable evidence. But as the day approached, the tension grew. Esther questioned if the fight was worth the price. "Marcus," she whispered, "what if I lose everything? What if my past, my mistakes, become all anyone sees?" He smiled softly. "Then we remind them who you really are. Not just a girl who brought food to a beggar, but a woman who dared to change the world." On the night of the broadcast, cameras rolled, and the city watched in stunned silence as Richard Hale's schemes unraveled. His facade cracked, revealing greed and manipulation. Public outrage surged, and calls for his resignation echoed through the streets. Esther stood tall beside Marcus, her heart racing. This was the moment their fight for justice began to bear fruit. As the crowd outside chanted their support, Esther whispered, "This is just the beginning." The fallout from the live broadcast was swift and unforgiving. Richard Hale's political career imploded as evidence of his corruption flooded the media. Protesters gathered outside City Hall demanding his resignation, and a formal investigation was launched. Meanwhile, Esther's community kitchen became a symbol of hope and resilience, but the victory was far from complete. Esther sat in her modest office above the kitchen, staring at the glowing screen where news anchors dissected the scandal. The weight of the fight rested heavy on her shoulders. She looked over at Marcus, who was meticulously planning the next steps. "This isn't just about exposing Richard," Marcus said, not looking up from his notes. "It's about making sure the system changes, that people like him can't ruin lives without consequences." Esther nodded, her mind swirling with both hope and doubt. "But how do we keep going?"
"We've made enemies, and it feels like every day brings new challenges." Marcus finally met her gaze, his eyes steady. "Because what we're building is bigger than any one person. It's about the community, about justice, and about showing that kindness and courage can topple even the most powerful." Suddenly, a knock sounded on the door. It was Linda, Esther's longtime friend and the kitchen's lead volunteer. Her face was pale, her voice trembling. "Esther, there's a problem. Some of the suppliers are pulling out. They say they don't want to be associated with the scandal." Esther's heart sank. "We need those supplies. Without food, this kitchen can't feed anyone." Marcus clenched his fists. "They're scared, but we can't let fear dictate this. We have to find new allies, people who believe in what we're doing." Over the next few days, Esther and Marcus worked tirelessly, reaching out to local farmers, activists, and even small business owners who wanted to support the cause. Slowly, the kitchen's shelves began to fill again. But the attacks didn't stop. One morning, as Esther was opening the kitchen, a black SUV screeched to a halt outside. Two men in suits stepped out and approached her. "Esther Collins?" one asked coldly. "Yes," she replied, her voice firm. "We're from the city's regulatory board," the man said, flashing badges. "There have been complaints about your operation. We're here to conduct a surprise inspection." Esther swallowed hard but nodded. "Of course, we have nothing to hide." The men scrutinized every corner of the kitchen, taking notes and snapping pictures. One of them sneered at the spotless counters and well-organized shelves. "This place is suspiciously clean for a community kitchen," he muttered. Marcus appeared beside Esther. "We follow all health and safety regulations. If you have concerns, you're welcome to review our records." The inspectors left with a warning to keep things in check. It was clear their visit was more about intimidation than genuine concern. That afternoon, Esther confided in Marcus. "They're trying to wear us down, Marcus. Every day something new. It's like a war." Marcus placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "That's why we fight harder. Because the stakes are too high to back down." But the battle wasn't just external. Some community members began questioning Esther's motives, influenced by whispers and rumors spread by those loyal to Richard Hale. One evening, as Esther closed up the kitchen, her friend Linda approached with tears in her eyes. "I don't know if I can do this anymore. People are saying you only want fame. They don't believe in what you're fighting for." Esther's eyes filled with tears. "That hurts more than anything, but I won't give up. Not when so many people are counting on us." Days later, a prominent local journalist published an article portraying Esther as a mere pawn in Marcus's scheme to gain power. The piece was filled with half-truths and innuendos,
Esther read it alone in her office, her hands trembling.
Marcus entered and sat beside her. "They're trying to destroy your reputation," he said quietly. Esther looked at him, resolve hardening in her eyes.
"Then we'll show them the truth. We'll let our work speak louder than their lies." Together, they organized a town hall meeting, inviting supporters, skeptics, and media alike. Esther stood before the crowd, her voice steady despite the butterflies in her stomach. "I didn't start this kitchen to become famous. I started it because I saw a need that no one else was meeting. Every plate of food served, every smile shared, is proof that kindness can change lives." The crowd erupted in applause, the support palpable. Even some of the skeptics were moved by her sincerity. As the meeting ended, Marcus whispered, "You did it, Esther. You reminded everyone why this matters." That night, Esther sat by the window, looking out over the city skyline. The fight was far from over, but for the first time in a long while, hope burned brightly. She whispered to herself, "This is just the beginning." The momentum from the town hall meeting gave Esther and Marcus a brief but much-needed boost. Supporters rallied around them, donations trickled in, and the kitchen buzzed with renewed energy. But with every victory came an equal measure of resistance, and the forces aligned against them were growing desperate. One crisp autumn morning, Esther arrived at the kitchen to find a small crowd gathered outside. Among them were some of the very people they had helped, smiling faces clutching homemade signs that read, "Stand with Esther," and "Feed the hungry, fight the hate." It was a heartwarming sight that made her chest swell with pride. As she approached, Marcus appeared beside her, his usual calm demeanor tinged with unease. "There's a reporter from Channel 7 here," he said. "Looks like they want to do a live interview." Esther nodded, bracing herself. Media attention was a double-edged sword. While it brought awareness, it also opened the door for further scrutiny and attacks. The reporter, a sharp-eyed woman named Tanya, approached with a microphone and camera crew in tow. "Esther Collins, your story has inspired many, but there are rumors suggesting your efforts may not be entirely altruistic. How do you respond?" Esther took a deep breath, steadying her voice. "I understand skepticism, but everything we've done here is for the community. It's about feeding people, lifting spirits, and creating a place where everyone is welcome, regardless of their background." Tanya pressed, "What do you say to those who claim this is a publicity stunt, or that you're being manipulated by powerful figures like Marcus?" A flicker of frustration crossed Esther's face, but she held firm. "I started with nothing but a small food stall and a big heart. I don't need anyone to tell my story. The faces of the people we feed every day tell it better than I ever could." The camera zoomed in on her determined expression before cutting away. As the crew packed up, Esther felt a tap on her shoulder. Turning, she found Marcus, his eyes grave. "There's more," he said quietly. "I intercepted a call last night. Someone is planning to sabotage the kitchen. They want to intimidate us, maybe worse." Esther's heart pounded. "Sabotage? How?" Marcus shook his head. "We don't know yet. But I've doubled security and alerted the local police. We need to be ready for anything." That evening, as the kitchen doors closed and volunteers headed home, Esther lingered, lost in thought. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the storage room. Her breath caught. She raced down the hall to find the door forced open, supplies scattered and broken. A note lay pinned under a heavy can. "Stop now or else." Fear gripped her, but she refused to show it. Instead, she called Marcus, her voice steady. "They've started." The next few days were a whirlwind of tension and vigilance. Yet the community rallied stronger than ever, volunteering in greater numbers and donating what they could. Even skeptics turned into supporters as they witnessed Esther's unwavering resolve. But amidst the chaos, Esther noticed a change in Marcus. He grew quieter, often disappearing for long hours. One late afternoon, she confronted him in his cramped office. "Marcus, what's going on? You're not yourself." He hesitated, then sighed. "I'm trying to find who's behind this, but there's something else, something personal. I'm not just fighting for the kitchen. I'm fighting for my family's legacy, and I fear the past might catch up." Esther reached out, placing a hand over his. "You're not alone. We'll face it together." Meanwhile, on the other side of town, Richard Hale watched the news with a bitter sneer. The scandal had cost him dearly, but his influence still lingered. He was not ready to give up. His phone rang. It was a voice Esther had never heard but would come to dread, an anonymous threat warning her to back off or face ruin. Esther listened, her hands trembling but her spirit unbroken. "I'm not afraid," she said firmly. "You can't silence the truth." Days later, during a busy lunch service, the kitchen's power suddenly cut out. Panic flickered across the faces of patrons and staff alike. Volunteers scrambled to keep things under control, handing out cold meals and candles. Esther stood in the center, rallying her team. "We don't stop here. We adapt. We fight." Outside, police had arrived, investigating a suspicious fire set to nearby equipment. The community's support swelled as more people realized the lengths some would go to stop Esther's mission. In a moment alone, Esther sat on the stoop, the night air cool against her face. She pulled out her phone and dialed a number. "Chief George?" she whispered. "Yes, Esther," his warm voice answered. "I heard about the attacks. Stay strong. We will stand with you." A flicker of hope sparked in her heart. The battle was far from over, but Esther knew she was no longer fighting alone. As dawn broke, Esther looked out over the city skyline, her eyes fierce with determination. "This kitchen is more than food. It's a beacon, and I will protect it, no matter what." The tension in the air was palpable as Esther and Marcus prepared for what felt like the most critical moments in their fight. Every success had been met with fierce resistance, but this time, the battle was no longer just about the food kitchen. It had become a fight for dignity, justice, and the right to be heard. Esther sat in her small office, the glow from the city lights outside barely penetrating the weight pressing down on her. Marcus was beside her, scrolling through files on his laptop, documents, messages, and surveillance footage they had gathered over the past weeks. Their enemies were cunning, using every trick in the book to undermine their efforts. Suddenly, Marcus paused and pointed at the screen. "Look at this," he said quietly. "It's a video from last week. Someone followed you after the town hall meeting. They tried to intimidate you, but you didn't notice." Esther leaned in, her eyes narrowing. "Who was it?" Marcus shook his head. "Unknown. But whoever they are, they're escalating." Her phone buzzed, breaking the silence. It was Tanya, the reporter from Channel 7. "I have an interview set up with the mayor," Tanya said breathlessly. "This is our chance to expose the corruption, but we have to be careful." "He's powerful, and he won't go down without a fight." Esther nodded. "I'm ready. The community deserves the truth." The next morning, the town square was crowded. News crews, activists, and curious townsfolk gathered, the air thick with anticipation. Esther stepped up to the microphone, her heart pounding, but her voice steady. "We stand here today not just to feed the hungry, but to demand fairness. We will not be silenced by fear or threats. Our mission is justice, and we will see it through." Applause erupted, but from the crowd emerged a figure who brought a hush. Mayor Reynolds, a man known for his polished smile and behind-the-scenes manipulations. His eyes cold, he stepped forward. "Miss Collins," he began, his tone oily, "your claims are baseless. You tarnish this town's reputation with lies." Esther met his gaze, unflinching. "I have proof. Emails, documents, witness testimonies. Your administration has been diverting funds meant for community aid." The mayor's confident mask cracked. "This is slander. You will regret these accusations." But before he could continue, Marcus stepped forward, holding up a folder. "These documents were obtained legally. We have every intention of taking this to court." Chaos swirled as supporters rallied around Esther and Marcus, while the mayor's allies sputtered, caught off guard. The power dynamics were shifting, and the mayor knew it. In the days that followed, the kitchen's volunteers faced harassment, vandalized walls, stolen supplies, and anonymous threats. But the community's spirit only grew stronger, their resolve hardened by the adversity. One evening, Esther received an unexpected visitor, Detective Harris, a seasoned officer with a reputation for integrity. "I'm here to help," he said, sliding a folder across the table. "We've been investigating the mayor's misuse of funds. Your case has given us the leverage we need." Esther's eyes welled with tears. "Thank you. We've been fighting so hard." Harris smiled gently. "Justice is never easy, but it's worth it." Meanwhile, the mayor's world was unraveling. His closest advisors began distancing themselves, and calls for his resignation echoed through City Hall. His public image was tarnished beyond repair. In a dramatic press conference, the mayor stood before the cameras, his voice wavering as he announced his resignation and pledged to cooperate with the investigation. The town watched, stunned at the fall of a once powerful man. But the fight was not over. Esther knew the system had deep roots, and change would require persistence. With Marcus and Detective Harris by her side, she began working on reforms to protect the vulnerable and ensure transparency in local governance. During a quiet moment, Marcus turned to Esther. "You've inspired a movement." "This is bigger than just a kitchen." Esther smiled, exhaustion and hope mingling in her eyes. "It's about humanity. About seeing each other." One day, as Esther prepared meals for the community, a luxury car pulled up. Out stepped Chief George, no longer disguised, standing tall and proud. "Esther," he said warmly, "I've been watching from afar. You're the kind of person the world needs. I'm here to help you build this dream." Tears streamed down Esther's face as she realized the journey had brought her to a place she never imagined, where kindness, courage, and truth had rewritten her destiny. The sun was just beginning to set over the city skyline, casting a warm golden hue across the streets that had witnessed Esther's journey from a struggling food vendor to a beacon of hope and change. But this day held a significance far beyond the usual rhythm of her life. It was the day justice would finally be fully served, and the future she dreamed of would take a solid, undeniable shape. Inside her modest office overlooking the bustling kitchen, Esther sat across from Marcus and Detective Harris. The room was filled with a quiet energy, a mix of exhaustion and anticipation. The months of relentless fighting against corruption, intimidation, and doubt were finally culminating in a breakthrough that could change the entire community's future. "There's been a lot of pushback," Marcus said, tapping the thick folder filled with evidence on the desk. "But with the mayor's resignation and these new testimonies, the prosecutors are ready. They're moving forward with charges." Esther nodded, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. "This isn't just about the mayor anymore. It's about making sure this system never hurts people like us again." Detective Harris leaned forward, his expression serious but hopeful. "The law is finally catching up, Esther. And your courage has been the catalyst." Just then the door swung open. Chief George entered, no longer in the guise of a broken man, but standing tall and proud, a symbol of triumph and resilience. His eyes shone with genuine admiration as he looked at Esther. "You've done more than just feed people," Chief George said quietly. "You've sparked a movement that will resonate for generations." Esther smiled, tears welling in her eyes. "I couldn't have done this alone." Outside, a crowd had gathered. News of the upcoming trial and the community's unwavering support had brought people from all walks of life to stand with Esther. They held signs, chanted slogans of justice, and shared stories of how the food kitchen had changed their lives. As the courtroom session began, Esther stood to give her testimony. Her voice was steady, carrying the weight of every struggle, every meal served, every insult endured, and every moment of hope that had fueled her journey. "I stand here not just for myself, but for every person who has been overlooked, dismissed, or discriminated against," she said. "This isn't just a fight for one woman or one kitchen. It's a fight for humanity." The courtroom erupted in applause. The judge, a stern but fair woman, looked thoughtfully at the assembled crowd and then at Esther. The trial unfolded with intense scrutiny, but the truth was undeniable. The evidence was overwhelming, and the testimonies from community members painted a vivid picture of the corruption and neglect that had plagued the town for years. The former mayor and his associates faced heavy penalties: fines, imprisonment, and permanent removal from public office. They were also ordered to publicly apologize for their actions. In the aftermath, reforms swept through the city council, ensuring transparency and accountability. The system began to heal, offering a glimmer of hope that justice could prevail beyond the courtroom. Back at the kitchen, Esther looked around at the volunteers and families gathered for a celebration. Children laughed as they shared meals, neighbors exchanged stories, and the air buzzed with a renewed sense of community. Marcus approached, handing Esther a small plaque. "For your unwavering spirit and dedication to justice," he said with a proud smile. Esther's eyes sparkled. "This is for all of us." That evening, under the soft glow of lanterns, Esther and Chief George sat together, reflecting on the journey. "You showed the world what kindness and courage can do," Chief George said. "And the truth is, anyone can make a difference." Esther nodded. "I've learned that giving isn't about what you have, but about what's in your heart." As the stars twinkled above, Esther whispered a silent thank you to those who had supported her, to the man who had seen her worth, and to the community that had refused to give up. This story, dear viewers, reminds us that true strength lies in compassion and resilience. That justice, no matter how delayed, is worth fighting for, and that the smallest acts of kindness can spark the greatest revolutions. If this story touched your heart, please share it with those who need hope. Like, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to support more stories of courage and change. Together, we can make a difference, one story at a time. Thank you for watching, and may kindness always find you.